Our last speaker of the day, as I said, we start with a motivational speaker, we end with a motivational speaker. So I've known Jim Cathcart since we shared a stage right here in San Diego in 1979. I was a university prof at the University of San Diego. I quit in December of 78. In January of 79, I had a speech right here at the Hilton Mission Bay, and it was for Century 21. And part of our payment was we got a table that we could sell our product. And the table next to me was Jim Cathcart. And we started carrying on a conversation, and we've been buddies and partners. He's been one of the most disciplined and relentless career builders that I've ever known, seriously. In good times and in hard times, he's always the same person. I think when you ask the members of NSA or anybody who knows Jim Cathcart to come up with one word, it would either be honest or trustworthy. That's the way he is. He's always looking for ways to help people succeed, always. Now, I don't know if you have read his credentials at all or ever have seen him speak. Anybody ever have seen him speak other than his wife and my wife? All right. But he's the author of 16 books, some of them with me. Remember, you'd go a long way to try to find a book just with my name on it. He's one of the most decorated speakers in the world. He's won the Cavett Award, which is sort of the Oscar of speaking. The Golden Gavel, anybody familiar with that? From Toastmasters. They only give one a year. Past president of NSA. And recently did an incredibly successful speaking tour all over China. And I got to tell you, if you haven't seen the Facebook posts on that, you just won't believe how they treated him. Literally like the Beatles. The Beatles. He has spent almost a decade doing a psychological research project that led to his book, The Acorn Principle. He's profiled thousands of top performers and those hoping and praying to succeed. And his next book, which you're going to hear about this afternoon, is Success Velocity. So please welcome my longest and best friend, Jim Cathcart.
Could I just get a collective, aww? Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I had the happy privilege this morning of waking up in San Francisco and giving a speech there. And then I jumped on a plane and hopped down here, and I got here early enough to sit in on some of the other sessions and soaked up a little culture here. So I'm looking forward to this very much. I really appreciate the value of what you do, and I hope you do as well. Because I think one of the best things we can do for other people is help them see the value of what they do, the contribution that they bring to the world. And when you think about it, everything starts with self-awareness if you're going to make a change. You've got to notice where you are if you're going to go somewhere else. You've got to have self-awareness in some way, on some level, right? And self-awareness is the ability, self-leadership, is the ability to get yourself to do what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, whether you feel like it or not, and still do it well. Would you agree with that? Yes. So the ability to motivate yourself, to cause yourself to behave in a way that will bring about the outcomes, whether you're in the mood yet or not. And that's a big, big factor right there. Well, the cool thing about self-awareness is that people who are self-aware are so much easier to work with. I mean, look at just the laundry list here. They're not worried, how am I coming to, is there something wrong with, they're not, and therefore they can listen to you, they can attend to you better because they're not preoccupied with them. They're much better salespeople. Why? Because they're not just giving a pitch, they're actually trying to help, right? They're much less likely to have problems that lead to absenteeism or lack of participation. They're much less likely to generate the kind of tension that causes a dysfunction in a working relationship. So the more self-aware we can help somebody become, the more we've empowered them to live at their optimum velocity. Velocity. That's my topic today. And I want you to think about what that has meant to you, velocity. You think about muzzle velocity on a gun, you think about velocity usually related to speed and force. But a lot of people trivialize it to mean only speed. Now, speed is the rapidity of movement. Velocity is the rate of advancement toward the target, the goal. Big difference. If you go on an oval racetrack and drive 200 miles an hour, your velocity will be 0 because you're not going anywhere unless you're in a race. Then you've got an artificial ending. But once a goal is established, once you know what you want, whether it's something you want for your family or in business or financially or whatever it happens to be, once you have a target, then you can start to measure or notice the rate of advancement you're making toward that target. It's like a bucket list. It's such a cool idea because once people make their bucket list just as a form of amusement sitting around the living room one afternoon, they start remembering it, looking at it again, and then actually making plans to do parts of it, and they start checking things off the bucket list. Cool. Good. What's a bucket list? A bucket list is an expression of what you value. It's your motivators, using the terminology here. It's your motivators, your values being applied to realities that you want to bring into existence. Okay? So how do you get that done? Well, velocity is a combination of many things. It's energy and drive. That's the angle with which you approach whatever you're striving to achieve. Angle is energy and drive. So think of that. Energy is a variable, but energy has a constant within it. So your energy pattern, you're either a high, moderate, or lower energy person. Most everybody has a pattern. And you can tell the high energy people, you know them when you're with them or around them. You can notice them from afar, never met them before, but that's one of them, right? The low energy people, that's one of them, right? So we got hummingbirds and snails, and you can recognize them both just like that. Energy patterns. Now, do the low energy people sometimes exhibit high energy? Yeah, situationally they do, but not consistently they don't. So if you see high energy right now, is that the situation or is that an ongoing trend? That's why it's so helpful to become more self-aware, to have these profiles and assessment tools so that we can determine what's a pattern and what's just a blip, right? Energy is influenced by a number of things. It's influenced by your rest. It's influenced by your nutrition, your exercise, a whole bunch of things. You could come up easily with a list, all of which are within our control somewhat. So we can control the inputs and the influences, but we won't directly control someone's energy. We can affect their energy, but we can't control their energy. It's kind of like if I have a tomato plant, I can plant it, I can nurture it, I can give it the kind of nourishment it needs. I can water it regularly exactly as it needs to be watered. I can give it the amount of sunlight that's perfect for a tomato plant, but I cannot, under any circumstances, ever make it produce a tomato. That's completely within its control. All I can do is affect the environment and behave tomato-friendly toward it, right? Okay, okay. So, looking at velocity, let's go back here. Velocity is part of it's like a pantheon of things that we can measure about what makes people who they are. Energy and drive, again, are variables that are affectable by us but not within our control. They're in that person's control, okay? But look at this. Areas of alignment. If we want a team, a group, an organization to work well together, we can align them with the vision, mission, and purpose. That's what I call the DNA of the organization. So if Tony comes aboard with my company, first thing I want to do is influence how he looks at what my company is and does, and who we do it for. I want him to buy our dream. If it's like Disneyland, an easy example, I want him to realize he's now working at the happiest place on earth And if he's having a bad day, he doesn't have permission to come poison our happiest place on earth. He has to call in sad, right? Because it's not okay to come without a smile, right? Okay, so vision, mission, and purpose. Number one job is to get people in your organization, your church, your family, your whatever, to embrace the DNA of the organization itself. They got to buy what you believe in, dream about, and are working, what you're working toward. Next thing, intellectual. That deals with capacity, okay? And a while ago, Greg was talking about this in relation to critical thinking, okay? A person's intellectual capacity, if it is very high, what I call conceptual capacity in my book, The Acorn Principle, conceptual capacity, that's about 2% of the population. That's people that have an intellectual bandwidth that handles pretty big things, right? About 18% of the population has what I call strategic bandwidth, and that would be an intellectual capacity that would be ideally suited to management, leadership, problem solving, project management, technology, things like that. You want me to stand up there to be on camera? Yes. Okay. All right, thank you. This doesn't mean stand on stage to be on camera. This up on the stage means get back on stage. Okay. All right. All right. So anyway, intellect. That, when I hesitate, it's because I'm trying to figure out what not to tell you. Because there's so much to talk about on this, it could expand into this big space. I just want to be succinct and get these into little categories so we can think about them efficiently, okay? Intellectual capacity is the elevator in which your values or motivators travel up and down. Can you relate to that? Does that tend to make sense? So if I have the third level, operational intellectual capacity, then I am one of most people. 80% of the population tends to be operational in their bandwidth, which is fine because at least 80% of life is operational. It's moving things from one spot to another, organizing things, finding things, fixing things, that sort of stuff. So it's function, right? So if most of the work in the world is operational work, most of the people in the world are quite well suited to that job, okay? And about 18%, maybe 20% or so, of the responsibilities are responsibilities that require more strategy and tactic, which would be the strategic bandwidth types, ideally suited to those leadership positions or initiating action. And then about 2% of the work in the world tends to be of conceptual nature, where you need to think about the greater idea and the long-term implications and so forth. So if we're going back to the Disney example, because it's easy, if we want to create the happiest place on earth, that's a concept level. Okay, what does that mean, and who does it mean something to, and how can we manifest that? That's all concept, okay? Then you've got to figure out, okay, how can you make that real and doable? And that's strategy. That's what you're figuring out. Should it be on the West Coast or the East Coast? Should it be a park? Should it be a theater? How are you going to do this? How do you get the people to come into this organization, embrace the DNA of it, and develop the habit patterns that would cause this to sustain happiest place on earth status? And then every day you manage the systems, you manage the steps, the processes, you manage individual behaviors. You put up signs, you do everything you need to direct behaviors and traffic to keep this functioning exactly as you want it to. So that intellectual capacity varies from individual to individual. Just like body size and shape varies, so does intellectual capacity. Now, happily, the vast majority of people have all the intellectual capacity they will ever need to live a quite abundant life. Certainly in the United States, that's so, right? So unless there's some serious intellectual impairment, nobody needs to go get smarter. They just need to use what they've got more intelligently, which doesn't actually require more intelligence. It just requires a better application of the existing intelligence, all right? Now, if I've got conceptual intellectual capacity At what level am I probably going to express my motivator, my values, my primary values? At a very high level. Okay? If I've also got high velocity, energy and drive, then I'm not only going to be intellectually expressing them at a higher level and really understanding things more profoundly, but I'm going to be aggressive in the way that I pursue them. All right? So that's why I say capacity is the elevator in which your values travel. And the values are what gives you a reason to do what you want to do. So if I'm aligning an organization, I want to align the people intellectually into the positions that are suited for what they can do best. I want to make sure their values are consistent with ours so that I put the right people in the right places and the right relationships. Then I want to look at drive and energy, which is the velocity factor. And then after that, I want to look at behavioral style. And behavioral style, there's another dimension beyond that. It may be that my behavioral style is high D, higher I, low S, low C, which happens to be the truth. But that doesn't mean you know exactly what mode I'm going to be operating in from moment to moment. So if you catch me in whatever, in a particular mode of behavior, like let's say my mode is passenger. I'm just going along for the ride. I'm not contributing anything. I'm watching and I'm observing. Not learning, just watching and observing, right? If I'm in passenger mode and you need me to be in leader mode, then you need to take some action to activate that. That has very little to do at that moment with my behavioral style. Once you get me focused on something I care about, or once you get me to care about what you care about, then all of a sudden you start to notice my behavioral style. Then you notice with the intensity with which I pursue it, you notice my velocity. Then you'll notice over time that if I am coming up with the same kind of ideas you've been coming up with, I've probably got the same value system that you have. So all of this fits together at the moment that's most appropriate for each one of these elements. That's why what you do matters so much. You teach people what to notice when. Think of that. You teach people what to notice when. Because there's some things you don't need to bother with at a particular time, but you really want to delve into at another time. Does that make sense? Okay. So these are areas of alignment. Once an organization is fully aligned, be that organization 2 people or 2,000 people, it's getting 100% of its capacity, optimum capacity, not maximum capacity, optimum capacity applied to the task. Its success velocity just went way up. Poor alignment, success velocity drops. And whichever part is missing is the part to focus on, right? So how much of you are you really applying day to day to what you want? And isn't that the question we need everybody to ask themselves? How much of you are you bringing to work? You know, the old line, the guy says, how many people work for you? He said, about half. You know, well, it's often the case and more often than not true, you know. How many people work for you? Well, how many people fully work for you or for your organization? How many people are really bringing 100% of what they could bring reasonably? I don't mean burnout level. I mean consistently what they could bring. Bring it all in, bringing themselves to the game day to day. How many? Would you, on average, would you say that it's probably less than half or higher than that? What do you think?
What size is the organization?
There you go. It vary, you know, there's all kinds of variables. I don't know. But that's the thing. If we recognize that there's unused potential, just like unused power from a power plant that nobody plugs anything in, it's gone. It was there for you and it's gone. It's over, right? You can't recapture that. You can only get the next wave that's coming through. right? So every day, people are showing up at work all over the world, and they're bringing a portion of themselves to the task, to the job. If we can help people increase that portion, we can make a profound difference in the world. Think of the organizations you're connected with, and then pose this question. What could happen if you got all of the existing people with only their existing talents to bring 100% of their effort and engagement to the job each day for a month? Would you be able to notice the difference?
Absolutely.
How much would you notice the difference? I believe, like you're indicating, it would be transformative. So how do we do that? We get people aligned into positions for which they are suited on all those various levels. And it starts with believing, going back here, believing in the vision, mission, and purpose, the DNA of the organization itself. Okay? So how much of you are you really applying? Years ago, I was here in La Jolla, and I went down to the Sea Lodge. You know the Sea Lodge in La Jolla Shores? The locals know that. And it's on the beach, La Jolla Shores Beach. And I was meeting a man who had a neighboring office to mine, Spencer Johnson. Spencer is the author of all, or co-author of all these books, and I worked with him on the one, Yes or No, The Guide to Better Decisions. And our offices were next to each other in downtown La Jolla, and he said, hey, you got a few minutes? Let's have a glass of wine on the beach, watch the sunset. Cool. So I went down there, and we're sitting, and during the course of our glass of wine, he said, you know, Jim, I've been noticing something. I've been observing people in your business. I said, my business? He said, you know, speakers, trainers, you know, subject experts. I said, yeah, what have you noticed? He said, I've noticed that they're easily separated into two groups, one very large group and one very small one. And I said, well, describe them. He said, well, the very large group seems to be operating primarily from their heads. They go to the courses, they learn the materials, they master the craft, they've got all the details, they have all the manuals, and they can walk you through them and find the legal cases or whatever else they need, the research, to document their points, and they're doing okay. You know, a lot of them are not, but many of them are. They're doing okay. And then there's a small group of people who have broken through that and seem to be just hitting every ball out of the park. Everything that comes up, bang, you know, another big win. And I said, well, clearly you're one of those, judging from your own track record. What do you think separates group one from group two? He said, group two, he said, it's an oversimplification, not his words, but they're primarily coming from the heart. In other words, they're working on and doing what they deeply believe in. They feel a sense of conviction in what they're doing, that their commitment runs deeper than most people. And they've also learned, those that are really doing well, have learned how to structure their life, their work, their relationships, and their organizations in a way that allows them to do what they do best in the way they do it best as often as humanly possible. They've structured their world to allow them to be their best as often as humanly possible. That means they're kind of reluctant to get into an unproductive relationship. They don't want to be around people who are pessimistic. They will aggressively avoid parasites, you know, the kind of people that just want to hang around you and take and are never giving. They are the kind of people who try to make more of their day, more of their life, intentional. Meaning when they rest in a way and at a place and with things around them that cause one of their many goals to be more likely to be achieved. So if they're going to go to Maui and lay on the beach for a week, they're going to lay there with reading material or listening material or with other people who are going to feed their likelihood of being able to achieve the next goal. So everything they do is done with a degree of intentionality to it. I remember years ago someone told me they had worked in Las Vegas and Barbara Streisand was having a show, and they were complaining about what a perfectionist she was. Oh my gosh, this has got to be exactly this way, and the timing, this and and the light and everything, and gee, give it a rest, lady. You got a good voice, just sing. No. Just having a good voice doesn't mean you're going to be heard. Doesn't mean when you're heard, the people are going to get it how rich and beautiful that voice is. Doesn't mean that in the lighting that's there already that they're going to be able to see your facial expressions and realize whether you genuinely seem to believe the words you're singing or not. The reason people at that level are at that level is because more and more and more of everything they do is intentionally that way. I was in a meeting this morning with a colleague of mine, Joel Weldon, a man that I've known and loved for many, many years. Paula, he said it was 25 years ago when we went to Lake Powell on their houseboat. Yeah, these are real gray hairs, real. And anyway, Joel is a guy, he's the first speaker I ever met who is kind of like the Streisand model, intensely intentional about everything related to his speaking. And I learned a great deal from him. I remember the first time I saw him speak, he had taped, the gaffer's tape, that like this black tape that holds these cords down, really strong tape. He had used that kind of tape on the little catch on the doors so that once the meeting started, nobody would open the door to go out to the restroom, come back, and in the meantime the door go and distract everyone. He had taped off the back rows of the room so that all the people would seat themselves in the front and fill the room up before they could take that tape off and release those reserved seats. He had given a detailed introduction to his introducer and said, please read this exactly as it is. And when your introducer's not your best friend, you really ought to do something like that, because it gives them a script, it makes them more relaxed, and it makes it much more likely the things that you want said will be said, right? So think about your own life, about your own organization, and about your clients' organizations. How can I help them, or how can I myself, become more intentional about each and every part of it, so that I can start coming from the heart more often because I've removed all that stuff that required only my head and my back, right? And do like Spencer was saying, going back. Get all of you brought to the table and help other people do the same. So here's the zone of velocity. Velocity, again, energy and drive patterns that are natural to you, okay? And drive is a variable that depends mostly on the clarity of your goal, how much it's compatible with your value system, so that your motivators are directly aligned with that, and how well you can see the path and the tools that you can bring together to achieve the goal. That's all drive, right? Whereas nutrition and energy and all that, we're relating to the other part. Those two together become your velocity. Now, what you want is flow. You want to be at the point in your life where you're able to stay in flow state almost all day long. Where no matter whether it's leisure activity or work activity, social activity, you get to be in flow state, because that's when other people are going to say, you know what, you're pretty cool, right? They may not say that to you, but they're going to think it. Because you are operating on all cylinders. You're being your best you, okay? Now, when you push yourself too much, when you take on more of a burden than you are capable of dealing with well, within the time frame that you've set for it, the first thing you experience is stress. And stress is invisible at first, but then it starts to manifest. The more it grows, it starts to manifest as anxiety. Anxiety is based in fear. You know, when people say, hey, I'm really anxious to meet you, my reaction is, why? What do I do that scares you? Oh, no, I'm just anxious to meet you. Anxious, anxiety, fear-based. How about eager to meet you? It's just words. Excuse me? Yeah, so is jerk versus high C. Or whatever. Choose a word and choose a category. If a person's a low C and they look at a high C, they could find any number of just words to describe that difference between the two of them. It does matter, doesn't it? Because words have meaning and meanings matter. So, anxiety. That's the next thing you experience, and if you sustain that state of anxiety for a while, it leads to burnout. Now, it's not a literal burnout, but what it is a psychological impact that is so profound that you have to go through a recovery cycle just to get back to normal. So it's never a good idea to take on more than you're capable of handling for long. You can take it on momentarily, and big moments occur where you don't have any choice. But to sustain that, bad idea, okay? It's also not a good idea to under-challenge yourself. Like Rick saying, overpromise, overdeliver. Well, under-promising or under-challenging yourself, taking on too little, means you're going to get bored. You're going to be distracted. You're going to be watching too much television, eating too many junk food items, and just basically wasting a lot of good opportunity to be fully alive. Okay? So that boredom, if it's sustained, becomes apathy. And then you start thinking, why bother? I don't care anymore. Used to care, don't care now. What's that? It's just a symptom that you have dropped out of your zone and you're not giving yourself a meaningful challenge to apply your life to. And if you sustain that, you end up depressed. And the further that depression goes, the more clinical you need intervention to get it just to where you can go back to normal. So once you've attained flow state, baby, you're beautiful. I want you on my team. So that's our job. Help people become so self-aware that they can identify and sustain flow state in as many ways and as many parts of their life as humanly possible. This is the current me or you. The current me or you has a mindset that's identifiable, right? Our current mindset, the one that's most common for us, leads to the actions we take now, which become habitual to us over time. And your habits are how the world knows you. So your reputation among the other people in the world depends on the habits that you're displaying. Your actions, repeated, become what you're known for, okay? And your reputation determines who's willing to take your call and who's not. Who's willing to spend some time with you and who's not. Whose doors are open and whose aren't, right? So your reputation leads to the relationships, and the relationships you have determine the size of your future potential. So if you just want a little bitty future, you don't need to do much. But if you want a really big future, look at your mindset. Look at how you think. Because how you think is a result of just who and what you've been exposed to up to now. You think it's right on some deep level, but it's not necessarily so. And if we don't re-examine our own assumptions from time to time, we don't know for sure whether we're on the right path. We just know it feels like the right path because it used to, right? It's like the memory of a right path or something. But if you want to change this, where do you change? Do you change this? Which one of those do you change? The answer is yes. Of course you do. But where does it start? Well, it starts with mindset. This is a picture of a familiar place. Anyone recognize it? Yeah, the Oval Office.
Your office.
Yeah, my office, thanks. Well, Paula and I were in 1994 in Washington, D.C. for the National Speakers Association convention. And that's what this little pin is, the past president of the National Speakers Association, little microphone. We were there, and I was president in 1988 and 89, which was just before they invented automobiles, I think. A long time ago. But anyway, in 94, we're at Washington, D.C. for the convention, and someone announced, hey, past presidents and spouses get to go on a private tour of the White House. So Paula and I jump on the bus and we go to the White House and we go through all the screening and we get our guided tour of this exciting and amazing place. And we end up in the foyer and we're standing there together. And Paula says to me, "Oh my gosh." Show him how you did that, Paula. Just say, "Here he comes." That's right. She said, "Here he comes." By the way, would you stand up so the group could say hi to you? My wife, Paula. I don't usually have my props in the room, so it's a nice treat. Thank you very much. But she was standing there beside me and she said, "Oh my gosh, here he comes." And I said, "Who?" "Oh." And I looked up and it's the President of the United States. It's Bill Clinton. Wow. Now, no matter how you vote, to meet the President of the United States in the White House during his term or hers would be a pretty big deal to most people. Yes? Well, it was certainly a big deal to me. I'm from Arkansas. I'm from Little Rock, Arkansas. So despite my vote, I was thrilled to meet the man. And he's very charming in person, amazing. And come to think of it, if he'd made a better life choices, he could be your speaker right now. But I got the better job of the two. Anyway, we're meeting and talking, and during the course of our conversation, someone else in the group, and it may have been Patricia Fripp or someone connected to this group, said to him, "President Clinton, we're professional speakers, but sir, in many ways, so are you." He looked directly at me and he said, "Half my job's keeping people in the right frame of mind." I said, "That's a keeper." Is that what he said? Yeah. "Half my job is keeping people in the right frame of mind." How many of you would agree with me half your job is keeping people in the right frame of mind? Isn't it the truth? Half of what we do is managing point of view. Half of what we do is managing point of view. That's why all of this matters so much. Dan Burris, futurist friend of ours, speaker. He says, people don't know what they want until they know what's possible. Isn't that the truth? You say, "Hey, what do you want?" And someone looks around at the obvious and states one of those as the preference. But you say, "By the way, you do realize there was something 5 times as good?" "No." Well, bring that, right? Go order food with Tony. You'll see, it doesn't matter what they show him. He wants to see what's possible. And so he always interviews the server and they have to go back to the kitchen to find out if that's even possible. But I guarantee you'll have a better meal if you eat with Tony. Okay? So let's talk about the better you. How do you get the better you? How do you get to there? Well, the first thing you do is identify what there is. And then you start influencing the parts, the steps along the way. You remember when this guy got the Academy Award last year? Yep. He stood on stage and he said, "When I was young, a friend asked me, 'Who's your hero?' And I said, 'It's me, 10 years from now.' And then 20 years later, that same person said to me, 'Now who's your hero?' And I said, 'Me, 10 years from now.' Because that guy is so much better than I am, and I will never catch him. But as long as I'm pursuing him, I'll have a better, more abundant life." Isn't that something? By the way, I recently saw in an article in one of the typical paparazzi magazines that Matthew McConaughey is a fan of Og Mandino, the author, motivational author. Me too. The future you see for yourself or your organization defines what kind of person or organization you need to be. Because you look at that future, you say, okay, I want all these wonderful things. I want to achieve this level, this status, this milestone. Well, once you see what you want, you can back up from there to who you need to be to get there. But it's not just getting there. It's getting there, staking a claim, sitting down and making yourself comfortable there because you deserve to be there. It's pretty common that a lot of people or a lot of companies can achieve a great status, but keeping it is a different thing altogether. You remember the ad years ago? Somebody had just opened a website selling a new product, And I don't remember who it was that did this ad. It was UPS or somebody like that provides infrastructure support. But this guy's sitting in front of his computer and he says, okay, time to go live. Ding! And he sits there and nothing's happening, and his colleagues gather around. They go, oh man, no sales. Yeah, I know. Ding! Ha! A sale! Ding, 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 ding. Wow, 5 sales. Wow, 15, 20, 500. Oh, 6,000, 25,000 sales. What have we done? Right? All of a sudden terrified because they weren't equipped for the level of success they were achieving. They didn't even know how to deliver. So this is about becoming the kind of person you need to be to sustain the success that you hope to achieve. In my book, The Acorn Principle, this is the basic premise. You've already got it in you. What you need in order to succeed is already in there. You just need to use your natural abilities more intelligently, more appropriately. So, this is the causation chain. That's my terminology on it. See, if I know what future I want, then I actually know how I need to think today. You can say, well, but what if the future is like 10, 15 years away from you? Well, I know how I need to be thinking today and for the next 10 or 15 years if I want that big future to become a reality. How do I know that? Because, well, let's say I want to be the owner of SeaWorld in San Diego, and I got no money, and I've got no experience operating a theme park, and I don't know anybody in San Diego. Okay? Good. If I'm going to own SeaWorld, not just San Diego, but all of them, who do I need to know? I don't know. Well, I don't need names. I need titles or positions. What kind of people do I need to know if I'm going to become ultimately the owner of a huge, thriving enterprise like that? You tell me, what kind of people do I need to know? Rich. Yeah, rich people, people with a lot of assets, or at least access to a lot of assets. Pardon? People who are insiders in that industry, have done that before, or at least understand that thoroughly. Who else do I need? Yes.
People who are influential.
People who can influence other people and open even more doors for me. Okay? Someone else. Yes. Yeah, people who care enough about me that they, or respect me enough at least, that they will help me acquire that kind of wealth and that kind of control. Yes?
People who have your vision.
Ooh, people whose vision is compatible with my vision. That's good. Okay? So if those are the relationships I need, could I, with no assets, in a fairly short period of time with a little Google search and talking to some people, figure out who those people actually are? Yeah, I could find their names, their locations, their organizations. I might even be able to get their phone numbers and email addresses. Okay? So I can know, just by knowing what my desired future is, I can know who I ought to get to know. Now, once I know who I ought to get to know, I also know something else. I know who they would open their door to and who they wouldn't. So I start looking at me and I say, okay, what's my reputation? Non-existent. Okay, what do I need out there as my brand in order to get them to open their doors and say, I'd love to spend some time with you. Come on in, let's talk about it. Right? So how do I get that reputation? Habits. By the way, in a business or an organization, organizations have habits too. They're called systems. So a system is simply a habit of an organization. Systems in your own life become your habits. You have a system for what you do in your home. You have a system for what you do with your health. You have a system for how you make decisions. That's a whole lot of what these assessments are about, isn't it? Identifying the patterns that are within the systems, okay? So then that leads me back to the actions. And if I'm not currently taking the actions that will create those habits, I need a discipline coach. I need assistance. I need something that's going to hold me accountable to get me to take the action that's needed, because I know most of the time I'm not going to feel like it. And if I can turn it into a habit, feeling like it won't be part of the equation anymore. First you form habits, then habits form you, right? So that leads me back to mindset. How do I need to think, and whose influence do I need? Is it Earl Nightingale on a recording day after day after day until I reorient my own mind toward a better future? That's literally what I did. Is it Tony? Is it somebody online that I don't know? Whose influence can help me sustain the mindset? What do I need around me? Do I need little reminders or sayings? Do I need to get up in the morning and read in my field? Do I need to read the Bible or read instructional materials or read inspirational works or whatever it is from my own belief system and my world? Maybe so. But I need tools and disciplines to get the mindset solid so the rest of it becomes a reality. And by the way, you can also do this in reverse. If your kids don't know what future they want and you don't know what to guide them toward yet, just guide them toward mindset and actions. Everything else will start to open up. Okay? Teach them how to think in more productive ways. Teach them how to be more intentional about even their play and their choice of friends to play with and where they play and what time of day they play and how intensely they play and so forth. Right? Different velocities, different approaches to making it happen. I love that cartoon. For the snail, this is a race course. For the turtle, that's just another day at work, right? So we've all got our own different velocities. And this is how it looks. See this part right here? That's a glitch. So ignore that part. Look at the 3 levels there. When we went from Keynote in Apple to PowerPoint in a Windows computer, we had some font changes. Zones of velocity. See that big purple blue burst up there? That's your goal. Over here, the lower left-hand corner is your current starting point. Your velocity is the angle with which you approach that goal and the starting point that you're beginning at. For example, let's say I grew up in a family where my mom and dad were college educated. We lived in a safe neighborhood. My parents liked me. Wow. And I was given the tools I needed in order to learn and grow. And even my friends were people who were interested in doing well in the world. Oh, and we went to a church or a group where the people were trying to make the world a better place and went there regularly. So all those inputs give me an advantage over people that didn't have that. Yes? Okay? So, and I'm not trying to put a particular bent on religion or anything like that. It's my own belief system is Christian, but whatever a person's belief system is, if their world supports what they believe and what they believe is life-friendly, then all of this applies in their category just like it did in mine. So, if you had an unsupportive background, if your parents never said well done unless they were ordering steak, if nobody seemed to believe in you and you didn't have access to the resources and your world was not safe, then if we have exactly the same angle of velocity, if we have exactly the same in all our other behavioral characteristics or personality characteristics, I will get there sooner because I had a head start. Okay? So, number one thing to look at in your own velocity is what's the gap? How far is it from me to my goal? Because someone just like me might be miles further away than I am or miles closer. Okay? So what's the distance between you and your goal? Number one thing to notice, gap. And then start finding ways to reduce that gap. And we could go into full seminars on every one of those things I just mentioned a minute ago, right? Second thing to look at is angle. Okay? Angle of attack, so to speak, in military terms. So what angle are you approaching your goal at? If your zone of flow, your natural optimum velocity, is very high, then like a Patricia Fripp, your velocity metronome is going to be like a fan, just like that. If it's more moderate, then, you're going to be going at a very different pace. If it's slower, you might go, nah. You know, it all depends on how you're wired. But angle is number 2. Number 3 is speed. Gap, angle, speed, GAS. Gap, angle, speed. Angle is the intensity and drive. So that's your energy patterns, your drive, the things we were talking about earlier. Speed is the efficiency of the payoff from what you do. So when you get better systems, when you get better tools, when you get more sophisticated support, when you find more efficient systems to use, then the same effort produces twice the result. Agreed? Okay? So the better you can streamline your world to make more and more of your day intentional, the more speed of advancement you will get with the same level of effort. Same level of effort. That's kind of a key point. Right? So when I talk about velocity and increasing your success velocity, I'm not talking about changing yourself and your natural velocity. Identify what that is, and then structure your world so that you get to stay in your zone all the time. Because guess what? You're happiest when you're in your zone. You're not happy when you're under-challenged. You're not happy when you're over-challenged. You're just happy as can be when you're in your zone. And that's what this whole thing is about. That's the reason for studying velocity. So one thing you might ask yourself is, what habits do I need, and what systems or habits does my organization need in order to have the future I want? Well, several years ago, I was out of shape, not out of shape badly, but I wasn't exercising regularly enough to be in top shape for me. And I thought, I need a new habit, a fitness habit. And so what I did was I found a local group in Thousand Oaks of mountain hikers. And every Sunday, every Wednesday, and every Friday, we go at 7 a.m. on a forced march for 3 miles to the top of a mountain, then turn around and trek back and go to coffee and enjoy each other's company. I have gone over 4,800 miles with that group in the last 13 years. And I'm in pretty good shape for me. I weigh 150 instead of 200 like I used to. And, you know, it's working pretty well. I've got the size of belt that I prefer to have as opposed to the default that would have ended up there. And let me tell you a quick story related to this. In 1972, I lived in Little Rock, Arkansas, and I worked as a clerk for the urban renewal agency known as the Little Rock Housing Authority. Little Rock Housing Authority had two offices, a field office in the industrial area of town, kind of rundown area of town, and then they had a downtown office, the headquarters. And I worked in the field office, and I was an assistant to Bob Moore. Problem: Bob Moore didn't need an assistant. So I was helping a guy who didn't need help, which meant I was a typical government worker. You know, I was sitting there at my desk all day trying to figure out how to fill time. I was 26 years old. I weighed, I'll do the math for you. I was born in 1946. I'm 69 today. So anyway, newly married, new baby at home, no college degree, no money in the bank, never had a high achievement ever in my life. I don't remember prior to that ever receiving a plaque or a certificate or an award for anything. My dad was a telephone repairman. Mom was a housewife. My grandfather was an invalid from a stroke that completely disabled him for 7 years. He was in our front bedroom, and Mom and my grandmother were his caregivers. And I had a little sister and lived in a typical suburban neighborhood, safe environment, walked about 3 blocks to school, no challenge, and just had a decent life. But I really, really thought I would be ordinary and unremarkable. But I didn't want to be. I wanted to make a difference in the world. I wanted to be significant. I wanted to be somebody that mattered. But I'd never stumbled across anything that seemed like my path. So I'm sitting there at the Urban Renewal Agency, and I'm bored to tears, and I've read every book on urban renewal on our shelves. And I've read the Bible from cover to cover at work in a 3-month period. Talk about spare time, yeah. And so I got tons of ambition, but I got nothing going for me. And in the next room, there's a guy on the radio. And it's Earl Nightingale, the Dean of Personal Motivation. And at that time, he was on 900 radio stations all over the world. And I heard his deep fatherly voice, and he said, if you will spend 1 hour extra each day in your field, you'll be a national expert in that field in 5 years or less. And I thought, wait a minute. 1 hour a day, 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year, that's 1,250 hours. That actually works. I mean, even for me. So even insignificant me, with an hour a day for 5 consecutive years, I could transform my world. Wow. What do I want to be an expert at? Well, it ain't urban renewal. And the more I thought about that, the less that appealed to me. And then I thought, you know what? I want to do what the guy on the radio is doing. I want to do what Earl Nightingale does. Problem, I had no clue what that meant. I just knew that's something I identified with, and I wanted to do it too. So I thought, all right, I'll take him at his word, and I'll devote, since I'm starting from kind of behind the curve, 2 hours a day, every day, to personal development. So I bought some recordings of Earl Nightingale. I started listening to those every day fanatically, and look it up, fanatically, I mean textbook definition. And I was reading, all the classics, Think and Grow Rich and How to Win Friends and Influence People, The Power of Positive Thinking, name your book, from that era. I was reading it. There weren't seminars very easily found. So when I would find one, I'd go to it. But I got around the people that seemed to be in charge of their own life, started spending time with them. My circle of friends evolved. The ones who were not into personal development drifted away. We were still friends, but we didn't get together as often. And the ones that were into it became my new circle, and all of a sudden my growth rate increased. What happened was I started focusing on my motivators, my values. And when I did that, I started rearranging my life to spend more time on those things. And in those things, my velocity started to show. My velocity is pretty high. So when I set a goal, it's a pretty ambitious goal. For Paula, she'll set a goal like get a new set of china. I'll set a goal like get China. And mine's real estate and hers is dishware, So there's a difference in those two in the amount of effort required. So as my life started to evolve, things started to change for me, not only socially, but also on the job. And I started doing my work, even at the housing authority. I started doing more than my job. And other people noticed it, and they promoted me. And then they promoted me again. Then they gave me a raise. And they made me an assistant to the board of directors. And then they elected me the president of the Employees Association as a joke. I wasn't at the meeting. Ha, ha, ha. We'll elect Jim. And that next year, I did all kinds of crazy things to get them special benefits. And, so I really turned it on. And it started paying off like crazy. And within 5 years, I was a full-time professional speaker. At first, I was teaching other people's courses. Then I started doing my own research. Then I bought a psychological research firm in Arizona. And I did the work that resulted in my book, The Acorn Principle. And today, I've been a professional speaker for 39 years. I've done over 3,000 talks, written 16 books, been around the world, completely around the world 2 times. Spoken in every one of the 50 states in the United States, every province of Canada, and many, many other countries. Wow! Wow! And I don't say that to impress you. I say that to prove what I'm talking about. Because, I was not somebody substantial that did this. Of course he was going to do it. He had the potential. No. I was somebody who expected a very unremarkable life and was operating well below his own level of optimum velocity. But when I started rearranging my life to fit with the values I cared most deeply about, and I got into my zone, and I learned how to stay in my zone, it absolutely transformed my entire career. And you can do the same thing, and many of you have. And we can teach people to do those same things. Because when you acquire yet another tool to help lead somebody or some organization to self-awareness, you put them in charge of getting themselves to, knowing how to get themselves to do what needs to be done when it needs to be done, whether you feel like it or not. Let me see how I'm doing on time here. We're getting right up to closing time. So let me tell you one quick story and then I'm out of the way. Age 9, 1956, my family took a trip to California on Route 66. From Little Rock, Arkansas, drove to Oklahoma, got on Route 66, all the way to California, straight out of the storybooks, all those things you read about and all those things you see in the old-timey pictures, that's where we were. We got to California, went to my uncle's house in San Diego. He lived on Coronado. He was a Navy captain. And he said, hey, there's a new place you have got to see. We're going to Anaheim. It's an orange orchard up north of here. And we went to a new place called Disneyland. We went to Disneyland the first year it was open. It opened in 55. We went in the summer of 56. And I went with my cousins, Bruce, Brian, and Johnny. Bruce, Brian, and Johnny. And Brian was my age, and the other were older and younger. My sister Kathy was with us, and it was my parents and their parents. We drove up to Anaheim, and they had been there before a couple of times. And now then they're taking us. And so at the beginning, they said, all right, Bruce, Brian, and Johnny, you take little Jimmy, and you go see Disneyland, because one ticket gets you all the rides. And we're going to take Kathy, and we're going to go see the park our way. See you back here at X o'clock. Fine. So first ride we go to is Autopia in Tomorrowland, where you get to drive the cars around the track. And I was 9 years old. This is a thrill. I couldn't wait to drive one of those cars. There's a problem, though. When you're checking in, they've got this little sign, and it says, must be this tall. Well, and that was my goal, but I wasn't there yet. Okay? So I stood under the thing, and they said, no, I'm sorry, you're going to have a driver. So the attendant sat on the edge of the car and drove it for me, and it was all right. It was more fun than not doing it, but still, you know. So the ride's over. I get out of the car, and I walk out the exit, and I'm looking for my cousins. Now, I don't know there are two exits, and neither do they, I guess. So I'm looking around for my cousins, and I don't see them. And I still don't see them. And I still don't see them. And I say, Bruce, Johnny, Brian. And I start a meltdown. And I'm having a horrible time. Oh my God, I am alone in Disneyland. Poor little me. And then it occurs to me, some miraculous thing happened inside my head. And this awareness said to me, Jim, you're alone where? Disneyland. Where? Disneyland. What's Disneyland? The happiest place on earth. I got characters to meet. I took off. I went out to see Disneyland. For the next at least 5 hours, I was a 9-year-old alone in Disneyland. I went to Frontierland. I went to the Davy Crockett thing, you know, and rode the keel boats over to Tom Sawyer Island. I got on stage at the Golden Horseshoe and sang Davy Crockett with all these other people. And I went on the jungle ride. And I was just having the time of my life and completely oblivious to the fact that I was a 9-year-old alone in another state. And then I saw my mom and aunt and sister in Fantasyland, and they said, hey, where are your cousins? I don't know. Well, come with us. So, you know, just happily went on about my day. And at the end of the day, of course, my cousins show up at Town Hall, which was our meeting spot, and they're like, oh, there he is. You know, they were going to have to admit they had lost Cousin Jimmy. And all day long, they'd been frantically running all over Disneyland looking for me while I'm gleefully having the time of my life. The difference between out of your zone, that was them, and inside your zone, which was me, right? So how do you get that kind of confidence? I don't know, because I sure didn't have that confidence based on my knowledge of my skills. I didn't have that confidence based on having taken 10 years of Taekwondo and knowing I could whip the world, you know. I didn't have it based on being an Eagle Scout and knowing the skills of every survival tool that I would possibly need. I got that confidence from realizing the opportunity was too big for me not to take it. So sometimes if you can't believe in you, believe in the opportunity. Or like when I started into the field of professional development, if you can't believe in you, believe in somebody else who believes in you. Earl Nightingale told me, believe in a system like Earl Nightingale's formula, 1 hour a day, extra, every day. Or believe in somebody that says, kid, you got potential. I believe you're capable of a lot more. But look for something to believe in, because the more you can believe in either a system or a person or an opportunity or whatever, the more you can teach yourself to make more of your life intentional, more of your world within your control, and the whole world a better place for everybody out there. I have a quick thing to tell you about, and then I'll get out of your way. Let me flip through this. You're going to get all these slides. I've got a PDF file of this, and I apologize for not telling you that earlier. But this, Thrive15.com, is an outfit in Tulsa that has an online learning network like lynda.com or Khan Academy. And I'm one of their new mentors. I have 110 under 10-minute learning sessions on there, videos. And you get a free ride for 30 days if you use thrive15.com/acorn as your code. So you can explore all of them you want to for 30 days, no charge at all. Also, a brand new Sales IQ assessment known as Sales IQ Plus, which you've already heard about, was recently co-authored by Tony Alessandra, Jeffrey Gittermer, and moi. And this is the official week that it launches. And that, a free look at that one is here right now for you. So this is all in the slideshow. I just want to encourage you every day to ask yourself this question. How would the person I'd like to be, that me in the future, how would that person do what I'm going to do today? The more you do that, the more life works for every one of us. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh yeah, dinner. So, thank you very much, Jim. Did you enjoy today? So tomorrow is going to be a challenge to top that, but I will tell you, we start the morning at 8:30 tomorrow with the famous Miss Fripp. So Patricia's going to start the day, and Mari Smith will end the day, and we have some great assessment presentations in between. So now we're going to go to dinner at Solare. Dinner starts at 5:30. It ends at 7:30 because they have a jazz band coming in and we have to be out of the way. If you need a ride, we have some cars to drive you over there. So if you need a ride, stay out in the hallway over here. We have several cars, 3 or 4 people per car. We'll just drive you over there. Dress casual. I mean, we're going to be outdoors and indoors. It's a cash bar, a lot of great Italian food. If you want to walk there, here's how you walk there. You simply go out of the hotel, come around to the right down this tar driveway, and you come to a sort of a cul-de-sac. That's called Farragut Road, right? Just walk up there to your left, a block and a half, and you come to a street called Historic Decatur. Just one and a half blocks up. Too much? Take a right. You're going to go 2 blocks to Roosevelt, or for Tulsa, Roosevelt. And right at the corner of Historic Decatur and Roosevelt is Solare. You'll see it. All right? And we are in the bar and the patio. So don't miss tonight, okay? 5:30 it starts. If you need a ride, just stay out here. We'll drive you. Brandon?
Clarify the dinner is on us.
Yeah, the dinner is on us, of course. The drinks aren't, but the dinner is.
Dinner is on us.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll see you tomorrow morning and tonight.